The end.
It's totally not where your door was in the hallway.
Right, so I guess that's the end. I don't know if there's like a screen after this. Yeah. So what do you think? How do you feel about it, Silas?
Uh, I like it. I think it was longer than it needed to be.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Um, um, is it Game Jam to game?
No, it's a game jolt game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's the final shot. Too Few Secrets was just like a picture of the city. I think. Just like a cookie cutter big metropolis with like a bunch of buildings that look exactly the same. Anyway, yeah. How do you feel about it?
um, I liked it. I agree actually with the username that, like the best experience would be you on your
Imagine you were about to say you on me on my own.
own.
Yeah. I only read Skype's cutting out a little bit, so
Oh, oh.
yeah.
Um, just I imagine that username was kind of right in terms of the best um environment would just be to you playing it on your own with no other, extra sources or other people around or anything. Though that said, I think if it were me, uh, I probably wouldn't have made it through the whole thing if I were doing it by myself because it is so long.
Yeah.
Um, but I like it. I
Yeah.
definitely wasn't like 200% moved by it,
Yeah.
just because I don't think the ending was, um, I don't know, super out of sight.
Right.
I definitely didn't expect a lot of the things that happened to happen. It was like it had its really its own unique like world
Right.
that I thought was really cool, and like I got a lot of really cool images in my head, and I really like the characters and the I think that as a concept of just you on your own doing literally nothing, and then like what kind of people those people would have to be to send you those letters.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean?
No, I totally get it.
Mr. Smiley or whatever is kind of in a different situation. Um, but that's kind of the point is that all three of them are really different. Uh, and I cared for all three of them. And honestly, I actually cared for Mr. Smiley the least, which feels bad because his was the most like dire. You know what I mean? And his situation was like the only one that was, I don't know, had super high stakes
Right. Right.
that were beyond his control.
No, totally.
But at the same time, that's part of what makes the story interesting.
Right.
Um, um, I think whatever it was going for, it accomplished that.
Yeah. No, I think they did a phenomenal job of setting a mood. Um, like it was very obvious the mood that it wanted to set.
Mm.
They really wanted to juxtapose you being stuck in the cell with a bunch of flashy colors and
Hmm.
happy things that really weren't. So that was cool. Yeah, and I think the big thing for me was that I had a lot of images of what the world was like.
Hmm.
Um, you know, from just these letters, right? So I was thinking about all the outside, and they did a really good job of creating a world without actually showing it to you, which is cool.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
like that a lot. That's awesome. As far as characters, you know, I don't know if this is what they were going for, but yeah, it's really hard to relate to characters that you just never see.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think that is partially the point. You know, they give you that bug at the beginning of like, here's your friend, I left him for you, and you like the first thing that I did instinctively was name him, obviously,
Right.
and like the only character I probably would have cared about in the slightest was Jonathan, the tiny bug that I
Hmm.
named. Um,
Hmm.
so in that way, you know, normally I'd be like, oh, that's what they were going for, so, you know, I get that and that's cool. But they kind of made it seem like you were supposed to feel for Charlotte, and I didn't. I'm like, like, and that may be because I was playing it with somebody else, but I think that is also because, you know, they just kind of go, oh, I like you, or like I'm supposed to be some form of love interest, and I want to see you, but then like immediately, and I get that it's supposed to be like, it's supposed to have been some terrible thing going on, but like over the span of 3 days, she like, oh, it's too long, I gotta go, I'm killing myself. It's just like,
Right.
And I get it, like if the time span was dragged out longer, this game would be crazy, but you know, if it was years instead of days and just kind of time lapse,
Right.
that would make a little bit more sense to me, because it kind of felt like that, you know, like each day was supposed to be like huge gaps in time as opposed to,
Because each day was about, it was probably a minute a second.
right, but I mean in terms
Right?
of like, yeah, exactly, like literal time, like they have a clock in there, they're reminding you that it's days, not years or something, but then like all the letters are like, oh, you know, I'm traveling, you know, across the country, and I'm, you know, watching the seasonal change in rivers.
I didn't even think about that.
You know, it's like, oh, well, the time lapse should be like much longer, and you know that might give it the more impact when it comes to the, I've been waiting for so long, I'm very lonely. So
every time I thought about the clock, I separated it entirely from that.
Yeah,
that's funny.
So, you know, as much as I get where it was trying to come from, and I feel like it had some really good ideas. I just don't know if they were all expertly executed. Although I think they were very good ideas in general.
Yeah,
I
agree, and I like the only word that's coming to my head that really fits is like sentimentality of everything by the end, right? How you become so familiar with everything. You know, in a room that starts out with just a bed and a clock, I guess, and those little wires. You're like, oh, what do I do? You know, I don't have anything. And then you get the Game Boy, and you get the poster, and you get the other poster, and you get the cake, and then there's a cake with a plate. You know, and like by the end, that's not a big part of the game at all.
Right.
But but you know, by the end, you really have spent an hour. Yeah. And for all intents and purposes, you have become familiar with every little corner of this small place, but at the same time, it's accumulated enough stuff to be relatively complex. You know, if you'd been dropped there,
right? If
you were dropped there blind right at the end with all those things, you'd be like, oh, well, what's this? What's that? There's all this stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, Jonathan, who does nothing, but at the same time, you love him. You're like, this guy's great.
Yeah, my tiny little bug.
Or girl.
Exactly, or girl. Jonathan the girl.
And it's interesting because with I think it is funny to hear you comment on things, because I think when the things I remember and the things I attach to aren't complete, right? Like they're just pieces of it, and I don't look at it in as big of a picture, like as you were just describing.
Right.
So like, for example, I found myself a bit attached to Charlotte,
right?
But at the same time, that every part of her that I was attached to was like sans mourning, right, and like the upsetness. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, totally. I didn't even like every time she was like, "Oh, it's sad, people are dying," I was like, whatever. I stopped paying attention.
Right.
But something about her ability to just like have faith in you after never actually meeting you,
right,
is odd. You know, in one lens, it's kind of weird and I guess maybe kind of creepy. But in another lens, I think it's really like beautiful.
Right. And I mean, I think having the characters be like, oh, this is you, and then like the one other person who's not infected, you know, so like there's this inherent trust.
I didn't really get that, but I mean, I know that's what the point was.
Yeah. I mean, I just like, that's where I feel like some of the inherent like, oh, why does she have so much faith in you already? And it's just because
right.
You kind of just automatically connect with somebody that is, you know,
you have something in common with.
Exactly. And then you're like the last two people like on the planet. So.
Right. From a storytelling perspective, it was kind of like,
Yeah. No, and I feel the same. There was again really cool ideas. I think they did a good job of like making characters without ever actually showing you characters,
Hmm.
which is really cool writing. I think the writing was well done. It just had like some weird discrepancies that I think kind of took away from the mood of the whole thing.
I don't know if I've ever actually thought this before. I think if anything, I usually think it the other way around.
Hmm.
But I honestly don't know if a video game was the best medium for it.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it would have done better in like a short story.
Yeah, which is a really interesting thought. I don't know if I've ever had that experience before because the interactivity, in my mind anyway, is almost always a leg above or a step above.
Hmm.
Like, not that, you know, gaming is better than reading. It's just different, but
Yeah.
I prefer the interactive medium more than reading in a lot of in not in every way, but in many ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally.
but I agree. It
It felt like a short story.
yeah,
I think that's the big thing. It felt like a short story. It felt like because it was a game, it, it lasted a little longer than you would have wanted it to, and
yeah.
so it kind of again detracted from the overall story. So like if you
Could have
just,
been like 40 minutes. Would have been perfect.
exactly, if you had had the whole thing, you know, in story format, it would have gone. I think the perfect length would have been really nice. And I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I think having a little vignettes, essentially a little vignette story
Mhm.
that happens in video game is really cool, and I'm totally okay with it not really being like typical game scenarios.
Sure.
I don't know. It does feel to me like it could have been better in short story though. Short story format.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where I'm going to stop Presentable Liberty. So thank anybody who watched that, and I'll probably put this up on YouTube and people can watch it there, and I'll leave the little talk I had with you in there, and you, Silas, and yeah, so that's cool. You're all awesome.